now. We're good?
Yeah, you're good now.
All right. So the first one, all right, it says approximate the value of f prime of 4.5, all right? And normally we would just say, okay, take, the slope from like 4.5 to 5 or 4 to 5 or 4 to 4.5, and any of those would be acceptable. But the problem here is that you've got an open circle at 5, right? And so when you are thinking about the slope at 4.5, you can't use the point at 5, 1, all right? And so the key is that a lot of people did this, but if you've got this curve here with the open circle, and then you've got this line here, right? If you want to estimate the slope at 4.5, right? You could use the slope from 4 to 4.5, right? That would be an acceptable estimate, right? And normally you could say we could use the slope from 4.5 to 5, right? But there's no point here. So the actual value at 5 is 1, and so you'd be estimating that as the slope, which is clearly not a good estimate of the slope at 4.5. Does that make sense? So for part A, if you have any difference quotient, you're going to get 1 point. But if you have like 4.5 minus f of 4 over 4.5 minus 4, right, you're going to get that value, or you're going to get the second point, right? So if you did this one, obviously 3.193 minus 2.533 divided by 0.5, right? That value is going to get you 2 points. But as soon as you are using f of 5, which happens to be 1, you are automatically excluded from getting the second point, because you're going to get a slope that is negative, and a negative slope can clearly not be a good estimate of the derivative at 4.5. Any questions on that? So it was worth 2 points. Sorry about that.
For that question, I sort of put it as like, because with on the open circle is sort of close to 5, 4, so I replaced, instead of using f of 5 as it is, I sort of replaced it with like 4 as sort of the y value, right? Yeah. Would that be an acceptable answer, or would I have to do the way
they wouldn't give you credit? They wouldn't give you both points for that.
Okay.
It basically says, this response is not eligible for the second point because x equals 5 is not in the relevant portion of the domain.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Wait.
And that one is kind of, I don't recall seeing a question like that where, they asked you a slope question and, you had to exclude one like that. But it does make sense when you think about, the slope from 4.5 to 5, if you're using 1, right, that's not valid. And like, it was Giovannis that just said, like, he used 4 as the y value for 5, but that's not true. F of 5 isn't 4, it's actually 1.
What if you use the limit from the left of 5? So I said,
yeah. Basically, I mean, I suppose if they were reading this, they might take that into consideration, but basically it says, like, I can share it with you, what it says in the rubric right here. It says a response using 5, 1 as the right endpoint only earns 1 point for knowing to use a difference quotient. This response is not eligible for the second point because x equals 5 is not in the relevant portion of the domain. The second point is earned for a correct expression that substitutes correct values from the table. The expression does not need to be simplified. Does that make sense? So that's what they're saying, so if you had any difference quotient involving, points on the table, you're going to get 1 point. All right, let's move on to B unless there's more follow-up questions. All right, so for B, all right, is there a value of x for x between 0 and 5 such that the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x equals 0? Give a reason for your answer. All right, so we need to recall what the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x over h. We need to remember what that actually means. So you should recall that this is the limit definition of a derivative. So this means f prime of x. And so the question really is there a point at which f prime of x equals 0? And remember that you are told that this is a graph of f, right? So if this is a graph of f, we are asking when is the slope of the tangent equal to 0? And so the slope of the tangent is equal to 0 right here at x equals 2. So at x equals 2, f prime of x equals 0. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I looked at B and I was like, I recognize this. Wait, isn't this the instantaneous rate of change function? And I looked over my cheat sheet and I realized that's one way to define f prime of x.
Yep. Yep. So that's what we're looking for there. All right, and that one was worth 2 points. Okay, so you get 1 point for recognizing that f prime of x is the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x over h, and then 1 point for giving the answer at x equals 2 with some sort of a reason. Okay. Any questions about part B?
Is your reason just f prime of x equals 0, or do you have to state that it's because there's a horizontal tangent?
Say that again.
Wait, is the reason, like, do you have to say that it's at x equals 2 just because there's the horizontal tangent?
Yeah, I mean something to that effect, that there's a horizontal tangent or something of that nature. All right. Any other questions with that one?
So do we have to write that f prime of x is equal to the limit as h approaches 0 of all that? Or because...
All right, so the rubric says the first point is for recognizing that the given expression is the derivative of f. The second point is for the correct answer. There is a value of x for x between 0 and 5 and communicating the connection between the derivative and the slope of the tangent line at x equals 2. So there's a wide variety of ways, I suppose, that you could word it, but that's what the points are for.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was a lot of people that said, like, no, there is no, value because this function never equals 0. Like, because the graph doesn't, like, touch the x-axis. Obviously, that's a 0-point response.
Mm-hmm.
But if you said, like, yes, there is a value because the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x over h is equal to f prime, but then you don't actually state that x equals 2, is it? Obviously, you're only going to get 1 point there. Okay. All right. And of course, as you look at what we give you, like what score you get on these questions, if you have a question about why we gave you a particular point or not, of course, email us. We're happy to discuss that. It's possible that we have made a mistake or something. So please do be in contact with us when you look at your results. Okay. All right, let's move on to part C. All right, so part C, it gives you 3 limits to evaluate. Limit as h approaches 0 from the right of f of 5 plus h minus f of 5 over h. And then the limit as h approaches 0 from the left of f of 5 plus h minus f of 5 over h. And then lastly, the limit as h approaches 0 overall of f of 5 plus h minus f of 5 over h. Now, the part that gave a lot of people a problem is that it says find the value or explain why it does not exist. And so some people were giving does not exist as an answer, but giving no explanation. And as soon as you do that, you're not going to get the point for that particular part. So There's just 1 point for each of these. All right, so what does the first one say? Well, basically, it's asking what is f prime of 5 from the right, right? If we are approaching 5 from the right, what is the slope of the tangent line? All right, and so we would be doing what? We would be taking f of 5 plus some amount minus f of 5 over h, right? And so when we look at this graph, if you take, here's f of 5, and then over here is f of 5 plus some amount, right? Like f of 5 plus h, where h is a positive value, right? So if we're finding the slope between these 2 points, no matter where I put this f of 5 plus h on the right side, it's going to be whatever the slope of this line is, right? And so you calculate that slope by just looking at it. It goes over 4 and up 1, right? Up 1 over 4, and so we get a slope of 1/4. So the limit as h approaches 0 from the right is 1/4. No explanation needed because it just says find the value or explain why it does not exist. So this value is 1/4. If you have that, you get 1 point. Okay? Now, limit as h approaches 0 from the left. That's going to mean we're looking for the derivative on the left of 5. But here's a problem that a lot of people had. When they're looking at this, they're saying like, oh, what is this thing approaching? But remember, how do you calculate the slope of the tangent? You calculate some value, let's say over here, f of 5 plus h, right, where h is negative, right? So it's some number, some value to the left of 5. And then you're using f of 5, right? And so you are calculating this slope. But as h gets closer to 0 from the left, this value goes closer and closer and closer to this open circle, right? And if you imagine connecting the open circle and the closed circle, you get a vertical line, right? And so that means that this limit is approaching an infinite value, right? Because the change vertically is going to be 3 over 0. And so this is going to be an infinite value, which would mean what? That this limit does not exist, right? Why? Well, because the numerator is approaching 3 and the denominator is approaching 0. Questions on that one? And that one is pretty tricky.
For C, like I thought about like the 3 basic rules for where f is continuous at x equals c, and I applied the same thing, except I didn't realize that I'm supposed to figure out f prime of x from the right, left, or anything. But I understood that, hey, if I didn't calculate what f prime of x was from left or right. I just said, oh, f of 5 from the left, f of 5 from the right, just like if I was using the definitions that make f continuous at x equals this point. And then when I looked at the graph, it's like, wait, there's a jump discontinuity at x equals 5. Therefore, some of these values may exist, but ultimately the overall limit doesn't exist because of that jump discontinuity.
Right. So yeah, so the last part, when you say f prime of, this is just f prime of 5, there's 2 ways that you can say that this thing does not exist, right? It does not exist either by saying that the limit from the left and the limit from the right are not the same, or you can just say because f has a discontinuity at x equals 5, f prime of 5 does not exist, right? If the function is not differentiable, right? So basically you get 1 point for 1/4, 1 point for saying does not exist from the left with an explanation, and 1 point for f prime of 5 does not exist with an explanation.
I'm still confused how you got infinity for as f
From the
of
left?
x approaching 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like, what was that
So,
explanation?
okay, so basically when we say f of 5 plus h, right, but h is negative, right, because we're approaching 0 from the left. So pick any point on the left, okay, I'll redraw the picture, okay. So pick any point on the left of this open circle, right? How about like right there, okay? If you calculate the slope between this point and f of 5, right? That's going to be this, right? Some negative value. Now, move this point closer and closer and closer and closer to that open circle, right? as you get closer and closer and closer, this slope is going to be more and more vertical, right? And if you actually went all the way to that open circle, it is a vertical line, right? Which means it has a slope of infinity, right? Infinite rise over zero run.
Okay, so it's like it's discontinuous, so the point isn't defined there, so you can't have
Correct.
a So is it I said it was like it didn't exist because it wasn't continuous, so then it wasn't differentiable. Could you say that, or is that not?
Well, okay, so f prime of 5 from the right does exist, right? It's 1/4.
Yeah.
But yes, the function is not differentiable at that point, meaning the like the derivative from the left and the derivative from the right are either not the same, right? Or one doesn't exist, or something like that. But the right hand and left hand limits could exist. Like, for instance, like what if you had a function like this, right, with just an open circle, right? You could say that the derivative from the left is approaching 0 and the derivative from the right is approaching 0, but the function is actually not defined, right? And so you know that the overall limit does not exist because the function is undefined. All right. That one is kind of weird, but I think the biggest part about this question is making sure that you recognize the limit definition of a derivative. Okay, if you didn't recognize, in parts B and C, the limit definition of a derivative, then that's definitely something that you need to go back over and review. Okay. All right, Mr. Dybus, anything to add?
No, just that this was only a 7-point question as opposed to like standardly being a 9-point question. And really knowing the limit definition of a derivative was 5 of those 7 points on this problem.
Yeah, so if you didn't recognize limit definition of a derivative, then obviously you probably weren't going to do quite as well on this question. But this is why we're showing you questions like this, because if you recognize limit definition of a derivative, you got a much better chance on this problem. All right, let's move on to number 2 then. Okay. All right, number 2. Okay, this is a pretty standard question. You're definitely going to have a differential equation in your future, right? So dB dt is 5 over the square root of t plus 4 plus 1/9 t minus 6 squared, with b of 12 equals 36, where b is measured in hundreds of books and t is between 0 and 24. All right, so part A, write an equation for the line tangent to the graph of b at t equals 12. All right, so a lot of people continue to get this question wrong. If I'm writing the equation of a line, what do I need? I need a point and a slope, right? So we need a point and a slope. So it says, write the equation at b equals 12. So I need a point. Well, the point we're given is that b of 12 is 36. So we get the point is 12, 36, right? So that's the first part. Slope. How do we find the slope? We plug this point, 12, 36, into the differential equation. So dB dt when t is 12. Now, you notice we don't need the 36 here because this is only a function of just t, right? All right, so we're plugging 12 in. So 5 over the square root of 12 plus 4 plus 1/9 times 12 minus 6 squared, okay? Now, okay, this is sufficient, okay? Remember, you do not need to simplify, okay? But if you did simplify, of course, you get 5 over the square root of 16, so that'd be 5/4 plus 1/9 times 12 minus 6, of course, is 6 squared is 36. 1/9 of 36 is 4, so 5/4 plus 4 gives us 21/4. So 21/4 is the slope of the tangent line. And so then you write your equation, y minus 36 equals slope 21/4 times x minus 12. All right, so that is the first point. Okay, now in some problems, this has been worth 2 points to get this value. Other problems, it's only worth 1. But then it says, the next part of the question says, use this equation to approximate the total number of books sold by time t equals 10. So now you are evaluating this when x is 10. So 21/4 times 10 minus 12, right? And then you add 36. So y equals 21/4 times 10 minus 12 plus 36. Now, once again, you don't necessarily have to simplify this, okay? But if you do, of course, 21/4 times -2 plus 36. All right, so 21/4 times -2, this reduces, right? And you get -21/2 plus 36 would be 72/2, right? And so you get 51/2 or 25.5. Okay, but now remember, okay, y is being measured, right, or the b is being measured in hundreds of books. So this is 25.500 books, right? So this would be 2,550 books. Any questions on part A?
I didn't realize that I had to do the hundreds of books. All right, I just
Now, as
reduced
far
it to
as the
25.
rubric goes, all right, they didn't say anything about units, so it is possible that they would give 2 points for just getting the 25.5 because they are going to hold you accountable to units in part B, and there's kind of a separate question for that. So obviously it is, you know, if you get 25.5, you've demonstrated, you know, a pretty good understanding of this question. So it's possible that you're going to get 2 out of 2 there. And they're going to hold you accountable to the units on part B, if that makes sense. Okay, any other follow-up questions on part A? All right, so for part B, all right, it says find b double prime of 5. And then using correct units, interpret the meaning of b double prime of 5 in the context of the problem. All right, so first of all, if I want to find b double prime of 5, I'm going to have to find b double prime of t, right? So b double prime. All right, so first of all, this is b prime, right? db dt. And so we're going to have to take the derivative of this. All right, so now remember that this is really like 5 times t plus 4 to the -1/2, right? And so if I take the derivative of that, I'm going to multiply by -1/2. So this is going to be -5/2, right? -5/2 t plus 4 to the -3/2, right? And then plus, now I've got 1/9 times the derivative of t minus 6 squared. So that's going to be 2 times t minus 6 to the first times the derivative of t, which is, of course, 1. All right, so this is b prime of t. So that is worth 1 point. Okay, now you want to evaluate b double prime of 5. All right, so now you're plugging 5 in. So -5/2 times 5 plus 4 to the -3/2 plus 2/9 times 5 minus 6, right? Now, technically, this is a number, right? And so you could leave it alone there, all right? You do not need to simplify this, okay? But if we do b double prime of 5, okay, that would be -5/2, all right? 5 plus 4 is 9 to the -3/2, so that would mean 1 over the square root of 9 cubed, and then plus 5 minus 6 is, of course, -1, so this just becomes -2/9. All right, square root of 9 is 3. 3 cubed is 27. So -5/2 times 1/27 minus 2/9. So this becomes -5/54 minus, if I wanted to bring this to 54, I would make this -12/54 by multiplying top and bottom by 6. And so we get -17/54. All right. Now, of course, like I said, if you leave this alone, it's fine. Okay, but if you go from here and you simplify incorrectly, now you don't get that point. So I really urge you guys to leave it alone. Okay. All right, but now that's only the second point. Okay, the third point says.
Can I take a little? Can I?
It says, hold on, David. It says using correct units, interpret the meaning of B double prime of 5. All right, so what does B prime represent? Okay, B prime. Okay, remember B is the number of hundreds of books, right, that are sold. So B prime would represent the number of books that are sold per hour, right? The rate of change of number of books, right? So then B double prime is the number of books sold per hour per hour. So in other words, this represents the rate at which the rate of books sold per hour changes per hour. And so the units here are books per hour squared. So it's kind of like an acceleration, right? Remember, like distance, then velocity would be like meters per second, and then acceleration would be like meters per second, or meters per second squared. It's the rate at which the rate of change changes. All right. And so the interpretation there, yes, is challenging, but a pretty basic problem finding a derivative and then plugging into a derivative for 2 out of those 3 points. And this is where I think that they might allow the 25.5 in part A, because now they're holding you accountable to the units of, and actually I wrote them wrong. It wouldn't be books, it would be hundreds of books, right? All right, so that is part B. All right, and then part C. Any follow-up questions on part B? Questions? All right, so let's go on to part C then. All right, so now part C says find an expression for B of t. All right, so remember, we're given dB dt equals 5 over the square root of t plus 4 plus 1/9 t minus 6 squared. All right, so remember, this is dB dt. So if I want to find b, I'm going to have to separate the variables. So I'm going to have to multiply by dt. Notice there are no b's on the left side. Okay, so as soon as you multiply by dt, then you're going to integrate. So I have the integral of dB equals the integral of this thing with respect to t. All right, so now I'm going to rewrite this as 5 times the quantity t plus 4 to the negative 1/2, 1/9 t minus 6 squared. All right, so now I have 2 different things added together, so I'm actually going to kind of do this as 2 separate integrals. All right, now the first integral, I technically need a u substitution of t plus 4. So I'm going to write like u sub 1 equals t plus 4, right? Which means du sub 1 equals dt, right? And so really, I just have the integral of 5u to the negative 1/2 du sub 1, right? So no extra like constant or anything needed there. Then plus, now I have this other integral here, and I'm going to move the 1/9 in front. And now I'm going to have to make u sub 2 equal to t minus 6, which means that du sub 2 equals t dt, right? And so we're going to have u sub 2 squared, and then du sub 2, no extra constant or anything needed there. All right. So now I've got 5. What is the integral of u to the negative 1/2? So remember, we add 1 to the power, so it becomes u to the positive 1/2 divided by 1/2. Then plus 1/9 times integral of u squared would be u cubed over 3, right? And then once again, don't forget to add c. All right, now remember, this was u sub 1 over here, and this was u sub 2 here. All right, And so this becomes 10 u sub 1, which is t plus 4 to the 1/2, plus this becomes 1/27 u sub 2, which is t minus 6 cubed, plus c. And remember, all along, this was equal to the integral of dB, which is just b. So this is b of t, right? But remember, we have this plus c. Okay, so now we need to find the value of c. So how do we find the value of c? We were given the initial condition that b of 12 equals 36. And so now I need to use that when t is 12, b is 36. So 36 equals 10 times 12 plus 4 to the 1/2 plus 1/27 times 12 minus 6 cubed plus c. Okay, now technically, all you need to do is solve for c, right? So you're just subtracting these values to the other side. So if you wrote c equals 36 minus 10, 12 plus 4 to the 1/2 plus 1/27, 12 minus 6 cubed, you have correctly solved for c, right? Now, I know that many of you guys want to simplify that, and I get it, and I understand, all right? But it's not necessary, right? Now, if we do simplify, 36 minus 12 plus 4 is, of course, 16. To the 1/2 is 4. So I get 10 times 4, so 40. And then plus 1/27, 12 minus 6 cubed. Now, the way that I approach this, 12 minus 6 is 6. 6 cubed means 6 times 6 times 6 divided by 27. And so I realized that 6 times 6 times 6, each of those has a factor of 3. So I just reduced this to be 2 times 2 times 2 with the 27. So that just becomes plus 8. Okay? All right. Any questions about that? All right. I feel like I have, I feel like I made a mistake somewhere. Did I make a mistake somewhere? Oh, yeah. I should have subtracted this one, right? When I solve for c. So this is minus 8. So 36 minus 40 minus 8. So I get that c is negative 12. All right. So now that means that the function for b of t is 10 times t plus 4 to the 1/2 plus 1/27 t minus 6 cubed and then minus 12, right? So that's the b of t function. Okay. But then it says, based on this model, what is the total number of books sold by t equals 21? So now we need to evaluate b of 21. And so I get 10 times 21 plus 4 to the 1/2 plus 1/27, 21 minus 6 cubed minus 12, right? So now that would be correct, but you need to recall that this represents hundreds of books. And so if you wrote this, then you're going to get that last point. Okay, now, of course, if you simplify this, all right, you get 10 times 21 plus 4 is 25 to the 1/2 is 5 plus 1/27. 21 minus 6 is, of course, 15 cubed. So I considered, once again, 15 times 15 times 15. And then I reduced the 27 and the 15s, right, to get 5 times 5 times 5. And so I have 50 plus 125 minus 12, which is 163. So that would mean what? 163 books, which would mean 16,300 books. All right. Any questions on part C? That is a challenging problem. There's a lot of stuff to do there. A lot of annoying, simplifications. Now remember, this problem, originally is a non-calculator question, but you do have your calculator available. So I mean, I guess if you use your calculator to do some of this stuff, it's not a huge deal, right? But remember, you also don't have to simplify, right? If you had this answer, right, and then minus this unsimplified value of C, you get it totally correct, right? And then if you plug in and you have that thing minus the totally unsimplified value of C, right, you get credit. So I want to urge you guys, while it is more difficult for us to grade, just because it's not simplified, it's totally correct, and you cut out the possibility for making some of those silly mistakes.
I think I'm forgetting how to, not necessarily, I haven't forgotten how to integrate, but I think I'm just like skipping over these prompts to integrate some of these given problems.
Yeah. Any specific follow-up questions or
No.
anything
No.
related to these?
How many points is part C worth?
Part C is worth 4. So the 4 points, okay, basically 1 point for integrating, right? There's really no separation of variables here, you know, because there's no B's on the right side. So you're not going to get any points for separation of variables. So the first point is for integrating correctly. All right. Then the next point is for constant of integration. So some people forgot to add a plus C. So as soon as you do that, the best you're going to get is 1 out of 4. Okay. So the second point is for constant. Then the third point is for using the initial condition, right? Is that you're plugging in 12 and 36. And then the fourth point, which is a really like challenging point, you got to do a lot of work to get that fourth point, but that is to find B of t and B of 21. Now, personally, I believe that if they put a question like this on this year's AP test, it might be worth more than 4 points, you know, because they might be able to give you more points for like finding the value of C and then, you know, recognizing the units in hundreds of books, you know, and so maybe they make this one worth 6 or 7 or something. I don't know. They haven't fully released how they're going to do that, but they are having a webinar tonight for teachers, so I don't know if they'll discuss anything like that on that tonight, but we will let you know about, you know, any of that stuff, you know, on Thursday. Any additional follow-up questions? All right. Well, as always, you know, reach out to myself and Mr. Dybus if you know, have any additional questions. We're going to have 2 more FRQs to practice tomorrow, and then another Zoom on Thursday. Next week may look slightly different based upon any new information that we have. I know we will have to give you in the near future an assignment, which is, it's really not calculus. It's really going to be just related to making sure that you guys are able to, you know, get into the system and, you know, and you know the details of what you're going to have to do on test day. So that will be an assignment. And we will have more information about that either tonight or within the next couple of days when they release that information. So there will be that assignment next week. It won't be really calculus related. It'll just be making sure that you have the details ready for test day. And then we will try to give you guys some additional FRQs that are going to be helpful, that are going to push you to make sure that you have some of that stuff, you know, memorized. Did everyone view the cheat sheet that we gave out? It was linked on Monday. Hopefully, you know, that's helpful. Those were items that we would have given you as memorization quizzes. I know that I talked about it in my class. There would have been some memorization quizzes that we would have given you regarding all of that information. So please do look that over. That is certainly something that you should print out and have available to you on test day. But I wouldn't recommend, I mean, you can have all your notes and everything out, but it might really bog you down on time if you're trying to flip through all of your notes on test day. And time may be an issue for people, so. All right, anything else? Mr. Dybus, anything to add?
Nope. That covered it.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. And we'll see this crew again on Thursday, probably.
Enjoy, everyone. Bye.
Have a great day. Go outside. Enjoy the sun.